I'm Dr. A.J. Tarpoff, and I'm the Beef Extension Veterinarian for Kansas State University. And I've been working with cattle handling facilities and cattle handling techniques for roughly 15 years to help improve the health and well-being for our cattle operations in the United States. Today I'm visiting with two producers in the foothills of Kansas to go over some key aspects of their facilities that have greatly improved the cattle handling on their operations. Utilizing different small improvements can make a drastic difference regardless of the operation. You know, a proper functioning cattle handling facility is critical for any operation. Really, it comes down to stress. Stress on ourselves, stress on our animals. Every time we handle animals, it's critically important to teach them good behavior for the future. So having a proper facility really helps dictates that on their success into the future. And that all comes down with both facility management, but also husbandry management and movement practices. Today, here we are at Jarrett Moyer's operation. He is a commercial backgrounder here in the Flint Hills of Kansas. We're going to be walking through this facility and showing some key aspects that may go unnoticed, but they were specifically done to help with the flow of cattle. Okay, the first of which is very subtle, but it is actually the slope that goes all the way up to the barn. It may not seem like much, but having this slight slope going uphill to our working facility actually helps with cattle flow, and even more importantly, it actually helps maintain the cleanliness and the drainage leading up into our working facility. We've had a couple inches of rain here over the past couple weeks, and if you'll notice, we have very good solid footing for animals to move through. Cattle and the weight that they move, they feel very comfortable climbing, okay? Now, we're not talking about climbing a cliff, but what we are talking about is a slight increase in slope that helps the cattle actually direct the one to go uphill towards the light. Next, we're actually gonna go in. These are the holding pins of the operation before going into our working facility. As you notice, they're designed at a slant, okay? There's a lot of key aspects that can help with having these slant designs, one of which just making sure that the cattle don't have to turn a full 90 degrees. Cattle tend to want to circle around the handler or circle around to be able to flow, and this helps utilize that natural movement to come into these slanted holding pins. This gate has two separate functions within this facility design. One is to make sure that it closes off our slant holding pins. Two, it actually opens completely to both lock into place and block off the lead up alley, as well as opens completely flat so it stays out of the way where it's not going to impede cattle flow. As it actually opens completely and locks off this lead up alley. Okay, that's its secondary purpose. So having multiple jobs for one gate can really help out to get more bang for our buck when it comes to metal in our facilities. This is the transition zone from outside to inside of our working facility. And this is really a critical control point where a lot of operations have trouble with cattle flow. Cattle tend to balk when going from a light to a dark location. And since this facility is covered and in a barn, this is a really bad lighting change. We go from very bright, very light outdoor environment to a very dark enclosed environment. In this transition, cattle are often reluctant to go into. Some things that can help that, okay? Number one, the inside of this facility has white metal, okay? The paint, the white, will reflect more light to be able to make that a more welcoming environment. Two is lighting on the inside. We have both artificial light in this facility as well as natural light. Nothing gives as much light as natural light. If you'll notice behind me, there's actually a garage door at the back of this facility that is open. And that natural lighting, cattle can see that natural light and they want to flow towards that light. Okay, and that really helps make this transition from outdoor to indoor is making sure cattle can see natural light at the far end. This facility utilizes a bud box design. I'm sure several of you are familiar with the bud box, but what's interesting about this bud box is there's a few examples of some really innovative strategies to make it even more effective. Okay, again, the idea with a bud box is cattle flow in to this large box. They stop, the handler moves forward on this adjacent side. Cattle will move around in a circular pattern around that handler into our working facility behind me, okay? What's interesting about this design is the bud box is actually wider than the lead up alley, Okay? Cattle do not like to feel confined whenever they want to flow. Think about it as cattle, whenever we turn cattle out onto pasture. Okay, we open the gate, they see the wide open, and they immediately go out into that open area. It's similar with our handling facilities. Okay, we actually have a 2-foot increase of the bud box design to make it a more comfortable environment for these cattle to flow into. Bud box design, if you're not comfortable with them or thinking about it, however wide your bud box is, the depth needs to be double that. Okay, so as you can see here, we have about a 14-foot lead up alley. It gets extended to 16 feet, and that gives that opening feel for these cattle to really flow into this bud box. The question always comes up with bud boxes, or any facility for that matter, about solid sides versus open panels in our handling facility. And I think there's definitely key benefits of both in certain situations. It really has to be molded to each operation. In this operation specific, we do have solid sides panels on the side walls, but if you'll notice, the back gate is actually open. Okay, and that's critical for the animals to be able to see the depth, to feel comfortable to go all the way to the end of the box. And if you'll notice behind me, there's actually several feet. We have a large open area past the back gate of our bud box that cattle feel the depth. They feel comfortable going all the way to the end of the pen. If the end of the barn was right at the end, cattle wouldn't flow. They don't feel the depth. They want to feel that they can keep going towards the light behind them. After cattle transition through the bud box into the working facility and they come down the straight alley into our holding chute, this is where another critical control point could be, where we can economically really make a better impact to improve cattle flow through our facility. And that is with these chute blinders. Now, these can be made of multitude of different types of fabrics or products. An easy one to implement is that are durable are actually conveyor belts. They could have been off an old baler, off of any type of conveyor belt. They can be cut to size and bolted to the side of the chute. And that's essentially what these blinders are. As cattle come in, these blinders help shield the chute operator from the cattle that they can't see them. So cattle feel more comfortable. They don't see a person standing right in front of them. And these blinders will really give the upper hand for the cattle to flow in where we can properly restrain them. Our final critical transition area of a working facility for cattle is right here, cattle exiting the chute. This is an example of a woven rubber mat. There's a lot of different rubber mat designs that are available both commercially or that can be made at home, where they can be bolted together, where we have a nice soft, very good footing situation for cattle to exit the chute and ultimately leave the facility. We've been through a couple of key aspects in different areas around a working facility. But whenever we make these changes or we invest in our working facilities, it really comes down to how it impacts the producer and the producer's animals. After you've done this facility, you've worked with it for several years, has it improved handling? Has it improved kind of the stockmanship with interaction with our animals?
I think it does. I think, like any facility, there's always changes you'd like to make, and nothing will be perfect. But you also learn how to work around that and okay, in this case, I need to stand here, which maybe isn't where you thought, but it's where the livestock tend to work the best from. And some of that's just learned as you go, and then changes that you make over time.
Yeah, and each facility has their own intricacies that we figure out over time. Lastly, how has this investment really impacted your overall operation? Both, managing employees as well as yourself.
Probably where it's really helped us the most is in where we treat a lot of high-risk cattle. Being able to be timely in our processing and treatment, that makes a big difference on how those cattle perform and our success with them.
Yeah. Well, you heard it. I mean, husbandry, cattle care, timeliness, usefulness throughout the entire season. All these are critical reasons to be able to invest and make some of the small changes to improve our cattle handling facilities for the betterment of the operation. Behind me today is actually a functional working facility that has been added on to over time to increase its effectiveness. And today we're going to walk through a couple of key aspects that makes it so special, but also makes it very effective. We'll be talking about the versatility of some of the unique areas within this facility, and also some of the additions behind me that can be done in an economic way. Behind me is an overhead shed above the working facility. This overhead shed, oftentimes when we think about brick and mortar, we think about cost. However, ranchers have an amazing way to repurpose different materials to change our use. And that's exactly what we see today, where we can repurpose different materials such as telephone poles. Okay, we can repurpose steel from different types of structural components to be able to revitalize it and give it new life with a brand new job. If you notice the height of this shed above the working facility, it gives us a lot of versatility to be able to, one, be able to get in with heavier equipment, to be able to clean or scrape. We can actually park different types of trailers if we need to, or even have a vehicle underneath the cover. Due to these different facets, we have a lot of versatility regardless of the time of year. One of the interesting facets of this working facility is the straight alley. It has a multitude of different jobs that are all done within this straight steel facility. Starting from the loadout, which I'm standing in, which is a simple swing gate, but it also gives us the versatility to be able to sort, send cattle in different holding pen directions, and it also serves as the backbone for the handling facility itself, as almost a modified bud box. Now the cattle will actually be housed and held right behind me. They will flow past our working facility, and this swing gate will serve as our back gate. We work the cattle from over here, and actually they flow around in the same manner as a traditional bud box directly into our working alley. From this modified bud box design, we'll be transitioning into the straight alley itself, where we will discuss some low-cost production methods to help be able to have a very usable, very durable facility, but decrease some of our costs. Some of the versatility of the repurposed materials that have been used in this facility have really added it a certain flair, but also its usability. The guardrails that you see behind me are actually the lower area of the working facility itself. It gives a smooth, robust, resilient material to help cattle flow through into our squeeze chute. The versatility of these is, one, they're very cheap. Okay, two, they last. Three, we can formulate them and bend them into certain directions to really make them useful for our operation. The design of this working facility is a straight alley, but it also implements some very open sides where the cattle can actually see people. This is used where the people, the handlers, can directly manage and give direction for the cattle as they flow through the system. We do have some solid sides at the bottom from the guard rail with protection so the cattle don't put their feet through these bars. Okay, so we have solid sides on the lower end, but we do have openness so the cattle are directly interacting with the handlers. I'm with producer Brian Reese here at his cow-calf operation, and we've been going through his work-in-progress facility, but is still very functional. Brian, I've got a couple questions for you. Number one, does it cost an arm and a leg just to be able to create a functional working facility?
There are really some ways that you can go ahead and minimize your investment, but still maximize what you get out of it. And yeah, we've used some new goods in this functional deal, but we've also reused and repurposed a bunch of materials here as we've talked about earlier today. You know, from the guardrail, from our trailer trash up above, our telephone poles that we've used, much of the materials that we've used, we've repurposed and made it to where it's fairly functional and reasonable at a cost. One of the other things we've looked at from a long-term situation, I know that oftentimes we get hung up on concrete and making sure that we have hard surfaces. In the working alley, the sorting alley anyway, we actually have a bunch of geotextile fabric underneath the gravel to go ahead and maintain that surface. It helps that we've got good drainage here, a little bit of slope, not a lot, so we don't get fast runoff, but we do get drainage off of here. Same way in the alley, and being able to keep that gravel there, keeping that surface there with the geotextile underneath it is a huge savings in time and money, really.
Well, and it really shows in the finished product. Secondly, what decisions really jump-started this project? What led to ultimately saying, I'm making an investment in my operation?
Probably what led to it as much as anything was occasionally an animal would escape from the previous setup, and occasionally there were some loud voices that didn't necessarily lead to a good, settled life for everyone, us or the cows. So we wanted to try and, make things a little bit better, a little bit more substantial, so that, having a solid facility that is firmly planted in the ground would make things work much more effectively all the way through.
Now, with that being said, with the building that you've actually put here and all the functional facilities, has it improved cattle handling here?
It very definitely has, or I feel it has anyway. And really, especially from a cow-calf side of things, sometimes you can start off with a animal that doesn't handle very well, but usually by the time, especially with cows, if you've been through here 2 or 3 times, they know what the flow is. They realize that you aren't going to hurt them, so they generally will flow very well. Occasionally you get some that sort of stand there and look at you, wonder why you want them to go that way, but by and large, they will flow fairly well through the facility.
Which really shows each time we handle these animals is an opportunity to teach our animals to float, whether it's working through a facility, whether it's out in pasture to respond to our movements. Every animal handling experience for these animals, between the human and animal interaction, we have an opportunity to teach them. Big picture, long term, what has this investment in this facility done for your overall operation?
I really think that it's made it to where, yes, it's a substantial investment, but at the end of the day, I feel that we'll be able to go ahead and continue to use this for many years to come. I'm not getting any younger. At some point in time, I probably will go ahead and retire, and at retirement age, I hope to continue to have livestock here that we can run through this facility, and potentially have a few more numbers as well. So we can grow that number and continue to have some income and have a facility that'll work.
So long-term investments really comes down to having a functional, safe, usable facility that doesn't have to break the bank. We can reuse different types of materials to still make a very functional facility by utilizing all the key aspects of cattle handling. Brian, what advice would you have for a cow-calf operator that has been on the fence, so to speak, about making an investment in a facility, unsure about cost, materials? What advice would you give to them?
2 things. Probably first, I would look at as many facilities as you possibly can. Go see how the animals handle through them. We looked at a number of different places, a number of large and small cow-calf operations, as well as just some pens in pastures. Some folks that have put some pretty simple basic structures in place to get some ideas out of things to do. Second, recognize that you're going to spend some money, make it worthwhile, and realize that, as time goes on, materials get more and more expensive. So it really isn't going to get any cheaper down the road. So if you're going to do it and you're going to stay in the business, do something that is practical for what you're doing. Do something that hopefully you can find at a reasonable cost, and move forward with it.
Now, those are great tips. If you're interested in making some of these changes to your own operation, it's always good to start with education. Okay, there's some phenomenal materials that are available through our Beef Quality Assurance website on the national website, bqa.org. Also, there's some facility design information that can be found at ksubeef.org. Both of those are full of useful information, not only for facility design, but also care and husbandry practices in the cattle industry. Those are the 2 areas that would really increase your understanding on where to start if you're desiring to try to upgrade something within your own facility.